Hello, Booktube. It's Roz, and I'm still kind of celebrating getting to 1,000 subscribers. Yeah, it may be silly, but I'm heartwarmed by the fact that there's that many people out there that might want to join me in thinking about books and talking about books. So I'm using that as an excuse to start a new type of video for me, and I'm calling these Booktube made me do it, and it's going to be an occasional series, shall we say, of Roz videos about how Booktube has affected my reading, my reading habits, things that I read, and celebrating things that Booktube has made me do. And I just got to say, this is not exclusive to Roz, okay? If you fancy making a Booktube Made Me Do It video, feel free. Maybe I'll even make a hashtag to go with it, because it's quite interesting the way watching Booktube videos, commenting on them, making Booktube videos does have an impact on your reading. For me, it's been, I think, really positive, and so this is part of celebrating that as I celebrate 1,000 subscribers. Now, I've heard booktubers talk about how being on Booktube has got them to read more, or perhaps got them out of a reading slump, say, and just watching people enthuse about books or starting to make videos themselves. It's sort of, yeah, that's been a change for them. I've also seen booktubers fretting about whether the time they spend watching Booktube videos or making Booktube videos, especially if they edit them beautifully, might actually take away from the time that they spend reading books, which would be a disaster from my point of view. So I had to think, and I don't think that actually Booktubers affect that either way for me. I think I read pretty much the same number of books as I did 3 years ago, pre Booktube for me. But it has changed, I think, some of the how I read and the what I read. And I'm going to save the how for future Booktube Made Me Do It videos, aspects of the how. But I want to pick on one of the changes to what I've read that Booktube's made me do. Now, one of the lovely things about Booktube is the readathons and read-alongs and group reads and so on, and those are the things that I think have an impact on my reading. I mean, if you look at the overall mix of what I read, contemporary fiction and books in translation, your works in translation, and a bit of non-fiction and a bit of poetry, and some classics, that general mix hasn't changed. But in terms of specific books, there are things that I've read because of Booktubers' recommendations. There are things that I picked up because they fitted a readathon, and that got me looking for things and then thought, oh, that sounds really interesting, I must read that. There are things that I've specifically read because of a read-along or to participate in a group read. And a startling example of that for me is sagas. Now, I owned some sagas before Booktube, but I've never actually picked one up and read it cover to cover. Here, this is the Laxadela Saga. Nice penguin classic that I think I've had for some years. This is a kind of an omnibus edition collection of Icelandic sagas that I've had for years, but I've never actually properly read any of the stories in it. Why? Why not? Why did I not read them before, and why have I read them now due to Booktube? The why I'd not read them before. Well, I knew they were important and interesting. There's lots of sagas around, and they're very influential on European literature. And then you get sort of more Germanic ones and Scandinavian ones, but the biggie are the Icelandic ones. There's more of them than any of the others, and they were written down in the sort of 12th, 13th century. So, they're old stories, and the stories in them are about the period of the 8th, 9th, 10th centuries in Icelandic history. And they're drawn from oral history and tradition, but then ultimately got captured by being written down. and they're enormously important to Icelanders and Icelandic culture. So, but and they've been very influential on, let's say, European writing, and you can see their influence in Tolkien, or yeah. So I knew they were interesting, and I knew they were influential, and I hadn't read one. I'm going to illustrate what I think is the reason why I hadn't. Okay, so this is one from this big fat book. It's actually the Laxdale Saga, which is this one too, and I read it last spring for reasons that I will reveal in a minute. But okay, this is how it starts. A man called Kettle Flatnose, the son of Bjorn Buna, was a powerful herseer in Norway and came from a prominent family. He lived in Romsdal, in the Romsdal district between Southmoor and Northmoor. Kettle Flatnose was married to Ingvild, the daughter of Kettle Ram, a man of good family. They had 5 children. One of their sons was Bjorn the Easterner, another Helgi Bjorlan. One of their daughters, Thorin Hirna, was married to Helgi the Lean. Helgi the Lean was the son of Eyvind Easterner, and Rafata, the daughter of Kjarval, the king of the Irish. Another of Kettle's daughters, Un the Deep-Minded, was married to Olaf the White. Olaf the White was the son of Ingjald, son of Frodi the Valiant, who was killed by the descendants of Earl Sverting. Kettle's third daughter was called Jorun Manvitsbrekker. Jorun was mother of Kettle the Lucky Fisher, who settled at the farm Kirkjurbeia. And so it goes on. Now, put your hand on your heart. I mean, I did my best to read that nicely, but would that make you want to carry on reading? It's not exactly what a creative writing course would tell you made a good opening to a story, is it? It's got lots of names. You get you realise you're going to have lots of characters who have the same name that you're going to get muddled up by. It's got lots of place names as well that mean nothing to you, but go into great detail because that was terribly important to the person that told the sagas and then wrote down the sagas. It's quite off-putting. Now, so I never got beyond that really in saga reading, and what got me over the hump and got me to enjoy and appreciate the joys of actually reading a whole saga, it was Booktube, and very specifically Sagalong. So Sagalong is an annual read-along event, and it has a load of hosts, and I will link to some of them below. And they've done it for 3 years now. This is the 3rd year. I first took part last year and I read 2 sagas, the Laxdale Saga and the Saga of the Volsungs. And this year, I'm, along with the rest of Sagalong's participants, I'm reading Njal's Saga, the longest, I think, individual saga, and a really rewarding one. And oh, what joy this is bringing me. Why are they interesting? Why are they interesting and enjoyable to read? It's that thing that Rosie's love about learning about a place or a culture or a way of life that I wouldn't do otherwise, and that I can learn about in a rich way through reading. And reading something that's, well, I was going to say fiction, but they're not. These Icelandic sagas are in a weird kind of halfway place between fiction and actual history. The characters in them are real, for the most part, real people. We know of them from other historical sources. The places in them are real places. Apparently, if you go to Iceland today, they can tell you, oh, that's Egil's Rock, or Kettle's Field, or they're embedded still in Icelandic kind of geography and genealogy. They can also trace their family trees back to some of the characters in these sagas. They have a kind of a unique language and set of ideas, I suppose, that is all about the fact that these were settlers in a uninhabited land, and that's one of the things that is fascinating about this, because when people came from Norway and other parts of Scandinavia and a bit from Scotland and Ireland to Iceland in the 8th and 9th centuries, Iceland was basically uninhabited. So they have this Wild West quality of lawlessness, of carving out an existence somewhere. but without there being like victims of that, in the sense of an indigenous population that gets pushed out. This was, basically empty territory. And uh, the sagas help you see or describe and explain how they went from that, yeah, real sort of arrive, start a farm, build your existence, steal each other's cattle, fight, have blood feuds. Power of the sword is what dominates the society. Through gradually to being somewhere that has laws and customs and accepted ways of living, and how it goes from being a pagan society to also this is the period in which Iceland was Christianized by missionaries from Norway, in effect. So it couldn't be more interesting, but you need something like Sagalong to kind of give you the impetus to engage and get beyond those lists of names and lists of places into the plot and the characters and the context. And I warmly recommend Jarl Saga as one to read. It's the longest of the sagas, but it's not ridiculously long. The whole thing is very readable, and it has probably more character development and plot development than most of the sagas. So it's a good one to get your teeth into. So consider joining Sagalong this year or next year, and but also, if there's something that Booktube made you do, in a book that Booktube made you read that you wouldn't have done otherwise, I'd love to hear in the comments. And yes, do feel free to make a Booktube made me do it video if you at any time if you fancy. And thank you, and thank you Sagalong hosts for making me read sagas.